speaking is a fundamental aspect that aids in enhancing a successful life. The impact you make has the proclivity in touching millions. It is with these words of Mr. Sheku Putka Kamara, I welcome you all to the 9th edition of Quest, the Antiglossophobia, here live on Multimedia Plus online television, and of course our Facebook page, the Antiglossophobia Academy. I am your host, Augustine Martinez. In today's Quest, the Antiglossophobia, the topic reads, how to utilize humoring techniques in public speaking. And of course, I'm having a guest. The guest for today is a renowned public speaker, motivational speaker, a journalist, and a consultant. He is a media and communications lecturer. This fine gentleman, of course, indeed, he is a specialist in print and media broadcast. And also, this gentleman is a positivist social media influential. My undividable viewers and listeners, permit me to introduce to you one of Sierra Leone's finest, renowned, seasoned, and oriented public speaker by the name of Mr. Sheku Putka Kamara. It is with great pleasure having you here today, and welcome to Quest, the Antiglossophobia.
Very many thanks, Augustine. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. In today's Quest, the Antiglossophobia, we shall be deliberating on the topic, utilizing humoring techniques in public speaking. How to utilize humoring techniques in public speaking. Yes, Mr. Putka, as a renowned public speaker, one might not take humoring very much serious whenever they are doing public speaking. I have witnessed speeches where speakers are very much bored, if I could say. They are so much formal and they tend to be very much serious while giving a speech. But and that might get the audience very much bored. But before we deliberate more on the topic itself, what do you understand about humor in public speaking?
Okay, when you talk humor in public speaking, in theoretical concepts, we would say they are symbiotic in the sense they are very much correlated.
Okay.
In other words, humor entices the audience to wanting to listen more or hearing more from the public speaker. And humor also helps the public speaker as a personality to calm his or her nerves in terms of easing tension, among other things.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, even where public speakers are expected to be formal, humoristic tendencies tend to showcase that there is a need for informal tendencies insofar as public speaking is concerned. So sometimes you hear we say all work and no play perhaps makes Jack a dull boy. In public speaking, we're saying too much seriousness has to be negated so that you can identify yourself with the audience, because audience segmentation is an important aspect of public speaking. And so humoristic notions help the audience to actually be in a better position of understanding what the statement or the speech is about, and also place the public speaker in a better position of knowing when and how to use them to feel in a more relaxed atmosphere.
Okay, interesting. Of course, which literally means you need to be utilizing humor on whenever you're doing your speech to get your audience not bored, but very much captivated and also active in listening to your speech. And also, another question here says that how to utilize this humor whenever you're giving a speech, how to use it.
Okay, traditionally, every speech is expected to have at least 3 sets, from your introduction, the body of the speech, and to the conclusion. Depending on the nature of the speech, you could have 3 to 5 paragraphs just on the body. So it depends on the structure and the length that the person actually has. Now, when we talk of using humor, there's no universal format that actually tells you that you must use humor at the intro, at the body, or the conclusion. What theorists and scholars did agree on is the fact that at some point in your speech, there has to be a way you relax tension. Because sometimes there has to be a way you understand the fact that as a public speaker, you are not the best of persons. You are actually just a channel being used to pass on a certain message. So what you have to understand is the fact that in your audience there might be other experts in line with what you actually say. Now what humor is actually aimed at doing is to ensure that people listening to you have what you call a relational standpoint in terms of understanding what you say, how you say that, and how that actually makes sense. So in terms of using humor, you are at liberty to start with a humoristic opening. Okay. In the introduction, for example. Okay. You are also at liberty to use humoristic approaches in the body of your speech. And in like manner, it is never bad to use humor at the end of your speech. Okay. What is important is that before the conclusion of your speech, statement, or talk, there has to be a way you ensure that there is fun. There has to be a way you bring about some amount of serious laughter. And underlying serious laughter, there has to be a correlation between what is laughable and what you're talking about. So that connection is always needed. So on a theoretical basement, you're always at liberty to use humoristic tendencies at any given time in your speech. Just make sure there's a correlation between what you are saying and what the audience really wants to hear.
Okay, interesting. Okay, again, considering the fact that utilizing humor will captivate the attention of your audience, and that's going me to my other questions, which says that as a public speaker, you do attend programs that has to do with probably funeral, where you have to give a speech at a funeral. Is it advisable to utilize humor in giving out speech at funeral also?
Okay, one school of thought did make it clearer that humoristic approaches are needed in every talk. And that's, on a logical standpoint, that's something that is universally affirmative. Okay. Now, when we talk about funerals, perhaps what has to be taken into consideration is the age bracket. Okay. Sometimes you would hear people say this is sudden death. Okay. Sometimes you would hear people say this is unexpected. Okay. Now, in those instances, there is whatever need to enhance serious principles. Because at the end of the day, you do not want to joke over something that, if English would permit you, not jokeable at all. Okay. But at the end of the day, we're saying, when you talk humoristic tendencies, there has to be a way you understand the subject matter. Because Matthew, in public speaking, unlike in communications and journalism, we're saying the speaker or the person, the communications person, has to be knowledgeable on many matters. And he or she has to be exceptionally well read. And sometimes we would say, if you are not informed, you cannot inform people. So there has to be a way you understand the 5 W's and 1 H in communications as to who, what, when, where, how, and why. Okay. How are those things closely related to what you are saying? If what you are going to talk about does not require any form of laughter, it is better you stick to formal approaches. If the situation is sudden, because even in media and communications, journalism, where I actually come from, okay, there's a notion about intrusion into grief and shock. You do not want to just bump into people in a state of shock or grief and say, for example, you're a journalist, you want to interview. There has to be a way you comfort the afflicted, which is in line with what we call journalism of attachment. So at the end of the day, it's about understanding the situation and understanding the strategies and tactics that you would always want to adopt. So it's about knowing the age bracket, what may have resulted or caused the death, and how best you would want to make use of humoristic tendencies. So for older people, perhaps the granddads, the grandmas, it is always advisable and okay, just so that people have a bit of flair. But when it comes to sudden approaches or people you know, sometimes it is always of essence to take caution and understand that this is a situation that does not require laughter at all. So it's about understanding the situation and knowing how best you apply yourself.
Okay, amazing. Okay, again, here, there are speakers who are, I see sometimes, who are very much bored, if I could say that, yeah? There are speakers, when they are given an opportunity to speak, they will never include anything that has to do with humor, just strict. And sometimes the audience might not find interest in that speaker. Yeah? So what could be some of the basic techniques in order for people who want to become, for our viewers, because we have viewers who want to be great speakers, who wants to be a better speakers as well, and what are some of the basic techniques you will advise in order for them to be utilizing, in more especially to utilize humor in giving up the speech? Because as you stated earlier on, these are some of the techniques you utilize in captivating the minds of the audience and also keeping them very much active. So what are some of the techniques to utilize when it comes to humor in public speaking?
Now, speech delivery in itself is a whole field on its own. In a sense, there are various ways of delivering a speech. Okay. you might have a manuscript presentation where the person has his or her documents ready.
Okay.
You just read through. I mean, verbatim, you would want to put it that way.
Okay.
You might have an extemporaneous presentation where you did not put everything, into paper, but then you have a few jottings you just want to use or what have you.
Okay.
You could have an arousing presentation or a memorized presentation. Whatever the case is, it is always of essence to study the audience. Now, in terms of public relations, there's always a notion about internal and external publics. In like manner, in public speaking, there has to be a way you understand your audience. Now, audience segmentation requires you to ask a whole lot of questions. One, for example, what category of people am I talking to?
Okay.
What is their age bracket? What is their knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, religion? All of these things have to be taken into consideration. Because normally we say when you go to Rome, you do as the Romans do.
Sure.
Now, when you deliver a speech, try as best as possible to understand the subject matter, but also understand the attitudes and altitude of the people. How would they react? What are they looking forward to? What are they expecting that I do? These are the things you actually concentrate on, because at the end of the day, you are not talking to or for yourself. You are talking to and on behalf of people. So when you deliver a speech, make sure to research. So first things first, there's a notion in public relations that talks about a public relations process that was adopted by one scholar, John Mastins. He talks about the RACE acronym.
Okay.
That in every process, there has to be research. When you research, you're asking yourself, what is the situation? When did it start? What do I have to take into consideration? The next thing talks about action. We are proposing that you only take an action based on the research you may have conducted. And the next step talks about communication. So you only get to communicate that which you may have intended to take an action on, and that which, of course, you may have researched. And then lastly, it's about evaluation and assessment. So as a public speaker, try as best as possible to be knowledgeable on the subject matter. And have it in mind that you may not be an expert. It is not a must that you should be an expert to deliver a speech. Delivering a speech is more or less an honor that has been given, and you have to live up to expectations. And you also have to realize that there might be experts and people, of course, that might be knowledgeable, even more than you, in the subject area. But with your research and with your time and with your focus, dedication, and determination, you could reach up to any certain height. So, great people we admire today perhaps did start somewhere. You know, you do not just wake up one morning and become an exceptional public speaker. Okay. If we're doing this today, we did not start this way. There were stages in life, people had to force us to say something in public, okay. You know, because it's a process, it's gradual. So if that's the case, research is key, but also practice. Because I remember always telling some of my students, you know, when you have a feeling that you are not able, that defeatist purpose in itself actually disturbs your quest to achieving greatness. Because at the end of the day, when you believe that you can, then you could. But if you have a feeling that you could not, then your chances of winning have been limited. And they've been diminished on an individualistic note, because self-disbelief is a key aspect of not making you realize your achievable aims. So it's about believing in yourself, but also researching and practicing, and also asking relevant questions to people that may be subject experts. When you do that, those could be some steps or approaches you use in ensuring that you deliver accordingly.
Interesting. This is a clear manifestation to say that he's a renowned public speaker, not only a renowned public speaker, but a seasoned public speaker. He is very much oriented with the cause itself of public speaking. That is why when you ask him a question, just a question, he will divert, he will get into the question in order for you to understand every single little thing about the topic or question per se. The very last question, if I could say, now in most cases, whenever speakers are speaking per se, they do blunder sometimes. Yes, they do mistakes which might not be intentional, or either mispronounce something and the audience gets to laugh about the matter. So as a public speaker, how can you utilize our humor to cover, to divert the blunder, or probably deviate the mindset of the audience from that blunder?
All right, first things first, we have to realize that mistakes are part of the human race. Okay. And sometimes mistakes could be inevitable depending on the situation. But what has to be taken into consideration is the fact that every mistake should not be repeated. And what I mean by this is the fact that sometimes you may subconsciously, as you did put it, make a mistake. But if people did get to the point of trying to make fun out of the mistake, it is always of essence to revert and make the correction. So I always try to draw my arguments and discourses from the standpoint of communications, because that's where I'm coming from. There's a notion that talks about admitting and defend. You know, in some of my works about public relations, I made a case that how do I want people to see or react to my institution or organization? Now, the answer to that is what I call public relations, because I argue that no sober public relations person would want to see the name of his institution in the bad books of the publics. So, when your organization is wrong, I am saying admit and defend. And in this case, when you're delivering a speech, if you may have made a wrong statement, it is always of essence to admit and defend and make the corrections. What is important is that people want to see you having the ability and capacity of understanding that this is not correct and that you're taking out a paradigm shift to correct it. What is important is that the product or the finalized notion has to be the real standpoint. But if you are not in position of understanding that this is not correct and you still continue to make those blunders, there could be errors that you could still learn from in subsequent editions, because like we all know, life never stops teaching, and so we never stop learning. It's about ensuring that you do not deliberately perhaps want to do or make the same mistakes you may have done in the past. So it's about evaluation again, which takes us to the process of the race acronym that says it's about assessing what we do, how we do that, and how best we ensure we move on in subsequent editions. So it is always not bad to remind viewers or listeners or your audiences that this is not correct, or like I did say earlier, and then you try to bring in something clearer or a perfectionist approach for the benefits of all and sundry. But it is always of essence to realize that mistakes are natural, and sometimes it's out of what you call the human desire to explore. But when those mistakes are made, try as best as possible to recall and try to remind audiences or viewers that this is not correct and that this is the right thing. At least when you make that clearer, then they will know the right path to follow.
Okay, the voyage continues. Indeed, of course, he is Sheku Putka Kamara, a renowned public speaker and also a guru in public speaking, to be very much precise. This is how we draw the curtains of this edition, but before going, I want to say finally, anyways, public speaking has been a fiasco in many facets of society, as people are afraid to speak in public or situation, even if planned or spontaneous. We have people out there who have several beautiful initiatives, or have people out there who are struggling, but they are still scared of standing tall to deliberate about these matters, just because they are having stage fright or they don't want to show themselves off in speaking, actually. And public speaking, I did mention that can be utilized as a means to transform. It can be utilized as a means to actually voice out things that are affecting people, per se, and it also can change the world to a better place, utilizing the means of public speaking. There are thousands of people out there who are struggling with glossophobia, that has to do with the fear of public speaking. And now, as a renowned public speaker who have a vast knowledge about public speaking and has been in the field of public speaking for over decades or two, if I could say, what would be your advice to people out there who are inspiring or emerging speakers?
Okay, so first things first, no man is born perfect, yeah?
Okay.
There has to be a way you start somewhere, you know? Like we did note, Rome was not built in a day. Sometimes we say the more you practice, the better you become. So it's about having role models again in society. Perhaps the world is now advanced in the sense, you now talk about mentorship programs, role models all over the place. When some of us were coming up, we never had those opportunities. Perhaps there are now greater opportunities and chances for people that may actually want to be better. I mean, communications persons, lecturers, journalists, or what have you. Wherever you find yourself, try as best as possible to have somebody perhaps you admire. Okay. It could be a male, it could be a female, whatever the case is. You may have a specific individual or specific individuals that you actually admire and want to be like them or even more than them. And sometimes we have a feeling that the more we admire those people, the greater or better we become. So I remember when I was a student at Fobe College, I had a sport journalist I admired, Russell Fuller. He was actually one of the BBC sports presenters who is now into tennis and cricket specifically. Now, that was a vision. And institutionally speaking, there's a need to have a vision and mission statement. The vision is actually where you want to be. The mission is actually what leads you to achieving that vision. So on an individualistic note, try as best as possible to assess and reassess yourself. Where am I currently? Where do I want to see myself in the next year or two? Who are the people that I want to be like? Who are those people that would actually help in mentoring me? And so sometimes it's not about the physical presence, but even the emotional or psychological presence also plays a key role, because when you have people you look up to, those expatriate advice will go a long way into shaping your career. So it is not bad to ask questions. It's a process of learning. We all have stage frights. The best of public speakers have stage frights. When you see thousands or millions of people, that phobia would always come in. It's natural. But what is important is your ability to continue to deliver, even in the midst of that phobia. So do not allow phobia to stop you. Have a mentor, have role models, have principles you follow, and see your dreams come true.
Okay, thank you so much. It is indeed a great pleasure having you here today. And of course, I believe the viewers have learned a lot. And of course, I have learned a lot because I'm still learning. And you said something about having a mentor. And of course, you are a mentor to me. And of course, he is a great emblematical emblem in whom I trust. And also, I want people out there who are viewing this program to start looking up to him, because he's not only a guru in public speaking, but also he's a man who is knowledgeable about several things. And of course, once again, it is with great pleasure having you here, and this is how we draw out the curtains of this edition of course, the Antiglossophobia. And thank you so much for coming through.
It's a pleasure, Augustine, anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is how we draw out the curtains of this edition of course, the Antiglossophobia. Here live on Multimedia Plus online television, and of course our Facebook page, the Antiglossophobia Academy. Thank you so much once again, and I am your host, Augustine Martinez.